And welcome everybody to the very first episode of the Chairman's Wrestling Podcast. I'm the chairman, Steven Vincent, and we are going to talk a lot about wrestling on this podcast. There's really no right way to start a podcast or for me to give you guys a reason to keep listening to this thing, so I'm just going to come out flat and say it. If you like wrestling, keep listening because I'm going to talk a lot about it. I'll be talking about the current happenings in WWE. I watch a lot of WWE, and the current product sometimes is frustrating, but it's also awesome too. But I'm also going to be watching a lot of older content that you can see on the WWE network. And I have been watching every Raw since the network launched as they've been released. I just got caught up from the first Raw all the way to the Raw after Survivor Series 1997. So I've sat through the dark times of the mid-90s for WWE. And then for the WCW Monday Nitro episodes, I started from the first episode of Nitro. And then I've also been watching all the ECW Hardcore TV episodes. And what I've been doing is watching them, in order. Like, I would watch Raw first, then Nitro, and then ECW pretty much. And then I would move on to the next Monday night. And then I would watch pay-per-views as needed. So needless to say that I have been watching a lot of wrestling on top of the current product. And the reason why I decided to start this podcast is because I've wanted to talk wrestling. I tweet a lot about wrestling on my personal Twitter account. And now I decided to do my podcast, so I will do a lot of tweeting from my podcast account. So I'll probably live tweet Raws and SmackDowns and pay-per-views, general thoughts on anything that could come up. So if you're interested in that, my Twitter account will be at Chairman Podcast on Twitter. So give it a follow. And as far as this YouTube channel goes, make sure you like it, subscribe it. Leave me feedback, positive or negative as well. I just want to know how things are going, what you like, what you don't like, something you maybe want to cover. Ask questions too. I definitely would love to answer some questions about wrestling in general. So, anyways, this first podcast is going to be about Survivor Series 1997. Most wrestling fans will know this as the most controversial night in wrestling, with the Montreal Screwjob happening between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, and I'll dive more into that later. There will be some podcasts coming up in the future regarding the upcoming WWE draft in a few weeks, Tuesday, July 19th, first live SmackDown. So I will try to get a mock draft in, I'm hoping, and maybe make some predictions on who's going where. And as I said before, I'll try to do a little podcasting regarding Raw, SmackDown, pay-per-views, and NXT as well. But anyways, let's get back to the topic at hand here. We're going to talk about Survivor Series 1997. And I was a high school freshman when this pay-per-view went down. So I was growing up in this era, and I kind of, I didn't watch a wrestling like hardcore like I do now, because I was busy with other things when I was in school, and sometimes I wasn't fortunate enough to get the TV away if my mother wanted to watch some stupid TV movie, so we had to watch wrestling when we could. And we were poor growing up, so we definitely didn't get to watch the pay-per-views. So a lot of these pay-per-views I'm kind of seeing for the first time. When I was a kid growing up, either you would have to watch the fuzzy screen and hope you could get some audio, which I actually did do that for Bash in the Beach 96 because I was curious who the mystery NWO guy was. And I remember when Hulk Hogan revealed with this fuzzy screen TV, and you could hear the audio clip in and out, and that was a crazy time. But anyways, get back on topic here. Survivor Series 97. I watched this pay-per-view last night, and, here's a good question for everybody that's listening. Other than the famous Bret Hart-Shawn Michaels match, can you name any other match on that card? Like right now, without going to your phone and Googling it or, is there anybody that can name a match on this card? Because I honestly couldn't really think of one until I started watching all the Raws. And, obviously, back in the day, Survivor Series, they actually had these things called Survivor Series matches, which you don't even see anymore nowadays. They're like, we might get one on Survivor Series in the current era that we're in, maybe two, but the Survivor Series matches were so much better back in the day. They actually had some meaning, I guess. We had that one a few years ago that meant something with the Authority versus this team of John Cena and Dolph Ziggler, but and Sting made his WWE debut, I believe. But the Survivor Series matches are nothing like they are back in the day, especially when this pay-per-view first started, way back when. And, this one, obviously the Survivor Series matches weren't really that crucial. It was more just getting the mid-card, low-card guys on the card. And, really the only other two singles matches that happened on this card was Stone Cold Steve Austin challenging Owen Hart for the Intercontinental title, and Kane's first technical match that actually lasted more than like a minute maybe. Then he faced Mankind. But I'm going to go over the card real quick here. And the first match was the New Age Outlaws, Badass Billy Gunn, and Road Dogg, which they just kind of united a few weeks ago prior to this event, when they both kind of decided to tell Honky Man to go to hell, and they kind of had their little heel antics, stealing things from the other tag teams, making some noise, trying to become a elite tag team. So here at Survivor Series 97, we're kind of seeing the first of the New Age Outlaws, which they eventually become one of the best tag teams of this era. And they were on the same team with the Godwins, Henry and Phineas, which they recently had the tag titles not too long ago until they lost them to the Legion of Doom. And they would challenge the Headbangers, Mosh and Thrasher, who also were tag team champions not too long ago. And they are on the same team as the New Blackjacks, Barry Windham and Bradshaw, good old JBL as we know him now on Monday nights with his commentary. But Bradshaw was, of course, Justin Hawk Bradshaw first, and now he became Blackjack Bradshaw. And, he's had a lot of different faces over the years, and obviously we all know him as the Acolytes, and then, of course, his solo run is JBL. So, fun time seeing him with a black dyed hair and his black mustache. But the match itself was nothing memorable, and the New Age Outlaws were the only two left when it was all said and done. So, like I said, they were on the rise. And then the next match was the Truth Commission, Forgettable Stable. Really never understood the purpose of those guys. I just remember that their names were Recon, Sniper, and the Interrogator. And then they had some old guy with them, and then he got replaced by Jackal. And really, none of those guys really became much. I know the Interrogator was just a big dude, and he eventually became Kurgan of the Oddities, and then there was Recon Sniper, and then I'm trying to remember if it was Recon or Sniper. I think it was Recon. But, he eventually became Bull Buchanan, B Squared, and how many faces he had at WWE. And they've challenged the Disciples of Apocalypse, which was Crush, 8-Ball Skull, and Chains, I believe, and they finally got away from that whole Lost Barricas Nation of Domination gang war thing going on for how long, and it was a mid-card thing that really didn't go anywhere. But this match was nothing special. Kurgan, being the big dude that he was the last man standing, and Jackal even wrestled in this match, which I didn't remember him ever wrestling, so that was kind of funny to see. And of course he did commentary. But again, another match that was just Survivor Series match and didn't really have any lasting memories, I guess. Then we had Team Canada, which was the British Bulldog and Jim the Anvil Neidhart teaming up with the tag team of Phil LaFon and Doug Furnace, because the other Team Canada members, so to speak, were busy defending their titles later in the evening. And they would take on the Team USA, composed of Vader, Goldust, Mark Merrow, and newly Steve Blackman. The show before, Steve Blackman jumps in the ring and Vince and JR trying to make it sound like he was a fan, and it just was hilarious. And the match itself was nothing really great either. I mean, it's kind of funny thinking about this match when I seen it, years later, obviously, and it's like, hey, this is the last time we're going to see Anvil and Bulldog in WWE for quite some time. I know Bulldog comes back a couple years later, but obviously his prime was, long past. But Bulldog used the old ring bell and behind the back of the ref to steal the last pinfall and was the last survivor for Team Canada. Because he knew Team Canada wasn't going to lose in Canada, right? I mean, but Team USA was just a hot mess. I mean, the recently passed away Brian Pillman, who passed away, early October of '97, just kind of was in the midst of a hot feud of Goldust when Goldust lost a match to Pillman, which gave Pillman the right to have his wife at the time, Terry, Marlena, and every week there was these raunchy segments with Pillman and Marlena, and so then of course Goldust was blaming pretty much his father and her and everybody and their brother, and he kind of just went crazy and lost it and started doing some weird stuff with his face paint, and he wanted no part of that team and pretty much left them high and dry. And Mark Merrow recently returned from an injury that knocked him out for a long time. His new look, short hair. He's a little edgier though, doesn't like people looking at Sable so much, and he's into this whole knockout boxing guy phase, which I think he eventually fights in that Brawl for All coming up, if memory serves right. And then, obviously, Blackman, the new guy in town, didn't last very long. And then Vader was a monster. But this is kind of the end of Vader's run, if I remember right. I think he may be another year. So, obviously, Vader was the guy that walked in the door and, dominated. And he had some main event push, but let's be honest, the mid-90s and WWFE, whatever you want to call it, was not very strong either. It was kind of a, like I said, the dark times. But anyways, Team Canada won. So Kane and Mankind wrestled in this card as well. And the debut of Kane was one of the best debuts ever. I mean, his first night was at Bad Blood in the pay-per-view prior to Survivor Series. The music is just awesome. The whole arena going red. And he just walks in there and rips the door off the Hell in the Cell and just destroys the Undertaker. And it was just incredible scene. And Kane just comes out week after week. He's got this. The Hardy Boys were enhancement talents at the time that really nobody knew them to be Matt and Jeff down the road that we all know him as now. And he kind of just went there and just destroyed them. And he destroyed pretty much everybody that got in his way. But one moment in particular was Dude Love. And Dude Love fought, he held his ground for a little bit, but eventually King got him down. And that's when that triggered the other persona of Mick Foley, Mankind. So Mankind wanted a match with Kane, but Sergeant Slaughter wasn't going to have it. So, of course, the Sergeant got the mandible claw for his troubles. So, of course, the match was eventually made, and it was pretty cool, reliving that and kind of seeing, that match go down, Kane's first pay-per-view match. And like I said before, probably technically his first match, since pretty much everything he did was just walk down the ring in the middle of matches or right before matches and just destroyed everybody. And there was one spot that Mick Foley or Mankind was on the apron, and Kane just grabbed him by the throat and pushed him off the apron right through a table. So, I mean, these guys went all out in this match, and Kane, of course, was the victor here. But, of course, Paul Baron Kane's agenda really is to get to The Undertaker, and The Undertaker swears he won't fight his brother. So that's where we're at right now. But, yeah, monster heels, there's a certain way to build them, and Kane was, spot on, one of the best I remember them building. And the guy was just creepy. I mean, it was awesome. And nowadays, Kane had a purpose, too. That's the nice thing about a lot of these guys in the mid-card during this era. And, the mid-card had a purpose. A lot of these guys had a reasonable rivalry, so it's great. Nowadays, it's just Baron Corbin fights Dolph Ziggler for no reason, or Sheamus fights Apollo Crews for no reason. That's the problem with a lot of the storylines today. We don't have a reason to care why these guys are fighting other than just, we're going to draw two names out of a hat, let them feud for 2 or 3 months, and be done. Yeah, unless you're fighting for the world title or you're John Cena, the writers are just terrible as far as most of it goes. But let's get back to Legion of Doom, Hawk and Animal, tag team champions. Ahmed Johnson and Ken Shamrock team up to face the Nation of Domination, which at this point it's Farouk, Rocky Maivia, which we all know becomes The Rock, D'Lo Brown, and Kama Mustafa. And I'm going to probably call Kama Mustafa the Godfather at least once in this podcast, because that's who he eventually becomes, and he was also Papa Shango years ago. So, and you can't forget Kama the Fighting Machine. Seems like this guy's had like how many different characters. But anyways, the Nation did not fare so well in this match. I remember Farouk getting knocked out early in this one, and then Ken Shamrock. This was I feel like when he started to snap, so to speak, and he would just take down everybody. He had that nasty suplex, and then of course that ankle lock was the big finisher he had at the time, and he threw Rocky Maivia in there and D'Lo, so he got that all taken care of. And then of course Stone Cold Steve Austin, even though he was knocked out of action by Owen Hart at SummerSlam with a neck injury, the pile driver, and Stone Cold just caused chaos for how many weeks, stunned basically everybody he possibly could. And leading up to Survivor Series, when they made the match between Owen Hart and Stone Cold, there was a few Intercontinental title matches along the way, and I remember Ahmed Johnson was one of them, and Stone Cold went there and stunned him, Ahmed, to make sure Owen had the title still at Survivor Series. And that was the one fun thing I remember now watching a lot of these older Raw episodes, is they had title matches quite a bit during Monday Night Raw. It wasn't always just pay-per-views, and now and then a title would change hands on a Raw. So it's kind of nice to have people care about Raw, and that's kind of something I wish they would do now again, is have a few title changes in the mid-card happen on a Monday night. Maybe once a year have the world title change hands on Raw. It probably won't happen, but it'd be a nice reason to give us fans, a reason to tune in on Monday nights instead of just watching, a bunch of promos and a bunch of stuff that if you missed it an hour ago, well, here you go, recaps. I mean, I almost wish some of the guys in WWE would go back and watch their footage from 19, 20 years ago, and because right in '97 when it's getting real good, as we all know, the Attitude Era is born real quick here where I'm at. And anyways, back to the Stone Cold Owen Hart match. It only lasted 4 minutes. I don't know how cleared Stone Cold was, to compete in a full match. I just remember looking up and all of a sudden Stone Cold stunned her and the match was over in 4 minutes. I'm like, holy shit. But Stone Cold gets the Intercontinental title back, beats Owen Hart, and then of course we're down to the main event. That would be Bret Hart defending the WWE, WF, whatever, what it is, World Heavyweight Championship against Shawn Michaels. And those that remember, and I, like I said, watched a lot of Raws, to lead up to this point, and these guys hate each other. And if you know the behind-the-scenes hatred there, I mean, it's real. I mean, you can tell, too, in the promos. You got to witness the foundation of Generation X with Triple H, Chyna, and Rick Rude. They were just taking shots at each other, calling things. I mean, the things that you definitely can't say now on TV because we're in the PG era, but it was a great build. And the thing that was entertaining to me was seeing the signs in the crowds during this time were very vulgar, which obviously if they try to bring these signs into the events now, there's no way they'd be able to keep them. I mean, there was some, being in Montreal, there were some really, really controversial slurs aimed at Shawn Michaels, and then of course some of the fans knew that Bret was going to probably leave WWF, whatever, so he, thank you, Bret, and, good luck in WCW. I mean, there was fans that were speculating that Bret was going to leave, and then the match obviously didn't start right away. I mean, pretty much when the two got to the ringside area, there was chaos. And I remember one time when Brett threw Shawn into the crowd, hostile Montreal crowd, and you can't tell me some of those fans didn't take shots at Michaels for all the stuff he did to the Canadian flag right before the match, let alone all the promos. I mean, the hate was there. It was, you won't, it's incredible how much. I mean, I urge all of you to go back and watch the build to this match and then the match itself. It's incredible storytelling here. And this is like the first time I ever seen the match itself. So, and after they kind of messed around outside for a bit and finally got the match started, I mean, it definitely wasn't their best match. I mean, I never did watch their match from Survivor Series 92, I think it was. I did see the Iron Man match a couple times, though, and that match was a classic from WrestleMania 12, I believe. So that's a match I urge fans to go check out for sure if you haven't seen that one. I mean, that was just a phenomenal match. 1 hour Iron Man match. I mean, you can't just have that happen anymore nowadays because they don't have these kind of matches anymore, which is a shame because I think there's some guys that are on the current roster that could go for an hour. I could watch Seth Rollins go for an hour for sure. But anyways, I was kind of waiting for the controversial, sharpshooter to happen. And, Brett was kind of dominating quite a bit of the match. And then Shawn kind of started taking over. And then, once Shawn got the legs, ready for the sharpshooter, that's when, I was kind of waiting for it to go down. And sure enough, it did. Brett was just there in the sharpshooter. And then all of a sudden, you see Hebner making the motion. And before you know it, the bell's ringing. And I've seen the highlight packages of Brett spitting on Vince from all the things I've watched over the years, and I can't believe how fast, they took Shawn, basically handled the title, and they're like, get the hell backstage, buddy. Get out of here. I mean, they literally pushed him backstage, and then they cut the show right there. It's like, whoa, what just happened? The show just ended, like, boom, like that. Usually, new world champion celebrating the ring, but obviously the circumstances with Brett thinking he was going to win, and that's what everyone thought was going to happen, minus a few that were in the circle that Vince had. It was crazy. So if I was watching that pay-per-view back then, I would have been stunned too. And that's the Montreal Screwjob right there and then. And obviously there's lots of people that have come out since and spoken about it. So it was a interesting event, let's just say. Which obviously, nowadays you watch pay-per-views, or back then you're ready for Raw next night because you're ready to see what's going to happen next. So sure enough, I moved on to November 10, Monday Night Raw, kind of seeing what was going to happen, knowing that Bret Hart is no longer in WWF, going to WCW, and I don't remember when he made his first WCW appearance, so I'm kind of waiting for that, and more on that in a little bit, but obviously, they're in Canada still for Raw, Ottawa. And, of course, DX is going to come out, Shawn Michaels, talk about his title, being the champion. And sure enough, they're cutting their promo and making an open challenge, saying he's a fighting champion. And here comes Ken Shamrock, who faced Michaels the Raw before. And, of course, Michaels tapped out, but, of course, the ref was nowhere to be found because DX shenanigans. So that's when Sergeant Slaughter makes the match official for the next pay-per-view in your house, Generation X. Shawn Michaels, Ken Shamrock, WWF World Heavyweight Championship. And of course that night we're going to have a match with Triple H and Ken Shamrock, which of course the Slaughter bans DX from ringside. More on that in a little bit. This Raw episode, though, obviously we know what the next main event's going to be. But there really wasn't much going on this Raw. I felt that it was a little weak. It could have been stronger, I think. But there was a few crucial parts, leading up to things. So I'll get into that in a little bit. But they had a match with Ahmed Johnson and Mark Merrow. And Merrow got DQ'd because he's been sneaking these low blows in lately to get wins. And this time the ref caught him. And then this is when they had the light heavyweight tournament going on. And I do remember that Taka Michinoku and Brian Christopher kind of had a little feud here. And this kind of started with Brian Christopher on commentary, knowing that Taka was a threat to him in the tournament, so he was going to try to make sure that he got screwed out of it. And no matter what, Taka did beat Devin Storm. And I remember watching a little bit of him in ECW, and I just realized, looking a little bit of information on Devin Storm, that he eventually became Crowbar in WCW. So that was kind of a trip, because Devin Storm's got the blonde hair, and Crowbar's got, dark hair and kind of a goatee beard, if I remember right. And I remember him hanging out with Daphne, and she was always screaming at David Flair, so quite the character change for him. But then we had Goldust and Vader kind of have a confrontation in the ring, because Goldust abandoned Vader, and Vader wasn't, too fond of that, so he kind of took care of Goldust. So we might have a match between those two coming up. And the Truth Commission and the Headbangers and where DOA came to the ring, and yeah, that match was nothing special. And then this is the best part, though, is Stone Cold becomes the Intercontinental Champion the night before at Survivor Series by beating Owen Hart. And Stone Cold's out there, talking about it all, and The Rock comes out. And I believe this is the first time that The Rock actually referred to himself as The Rock. And it's kind of funny seeing him out there by himself, all the other Nation members, just out there on the stage, calling out Stone Cold. And, this is like the birth of The Rock, in a way. It's also the birth of the Attitude Era, so it's kind of funny how this all happened. But, this is kind of like the official seeds are planted for the big, long rivalry that we all know to become Stone Cold and The Rock. Because if you do remember, right, they had a brief feud for the Intercontinental title, and this is where it starts. So I'm definitely looking forward to watching this go down, because this is one of my favorite feuds during this time. But we had Steve Blackman out there talking, and the Los Boricuas. If you don't remember them, it was a stable that Savio Vega had, and a bunch of guys that, well, doesn't really matter. But Savio wasn't out there for this. It was just the other three, and yeah, that was pretty stupid. And then the New Age Outlaws had a match with the Blackjacks, a bunkhouse match or something, I don't know. Basically, it was a no DQ match, weapons. They took out Barry Windham backstage earlier in the show, so Bradshaw went out there alone, and sure enough, the Outlaws 2 against 1, let's be honest, Bradshaw's not going to get her done, especially with the way the Outlaws are being booked. They're being booked as a great big tag team, so they got the win. And then Jeff Jarrett recently returned to WWF. He obviously, we all know him as the Double J thing, and then he went to WCW for a bit, and now he's back, and he's basically just shooting and on WCW, and talk about how he's going to become the world champion. Spoiler alert, Jeff never won it. So, yeah, well, that's going to be fun to see. And then Butterbean's hanging around the crowd. Remember that Brawl for All thing that he won? And then Mark Merrow was all getting in his face. And then he's like, "Don't look at Sable." And then we had Kama Mustafa taking on The Undertaker. And this is the first Undertaker appearance in the arena since Bad Blood. And, of course, Kane comes out and Paul Bear, and the whole "I will not fight my brother," and Paul Bear's poisoned your mind. And so, obviously, that, it's a slow burn there, which is fine, because it's a good job, that whole feud. But then the main event was, Triple H and Ken Shamrock, and the match itself, they did their thing. But of course, the best part was reading the signs in the crowd, which entertains me. One that stuck out in this match was Hemsley mid-card for life. And I'm like, oh, if that fan only could see the future, because we all know what happens. Triple H becomes a 14-time world champion. Not so much mid-card for life. But anyways, Rick Rude's down there. Sergeant Slaughter's down there. Chyna's trying to run the ring, and Slaughter's trying to stop her. And then here comes Michaels getting that briefcase of Rick Rude was always carrying around, and then Michaels smashes Ken Shamrock, and yeah, it was a chaos match. I think was eventually ruled a no contest, but I do remember watching right when the show was closing that Triple H pinned Shamrock, and they counted at 2, and then I think Slaughter pulled him off. I don't know, but Yeah, that was a thing that you liked to do back then, was just cut the show like mid-match or mid-attack, But that was that Raw episode, and like I said, it was really nothing special. He just elevated the feud between DX and now Ken Shamrock, and then of course the Hearts are all gone, but Owen wasn't on this show yet. And of course the seeds are planted for Stone Cold and The Rock's Intercontinental title feud. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next Raw episode. But I am now moving on to Nitro, WCW. And, they obviously have been hyping up the Hogan vs. Sting match for Starrcade, which is their December pay-per-view. So if World War III in November, they pretty much don't care about World War III. They're basically Hogan Sting, which has been a slow burn as well because, Sting hasn't really talked in how long, and he's been doing the whole crow thing and jumping on the rafters, beating people with bats, and not wrestling in forever, and so it's kind of a big deal for WCW. But the show started off with the NWO coming to the ring with Canadian flags. So I was like, I don't remember this, but I will be honest, I'd probably watch more Raw than Nitro during the Monday Night Wars. So here comes, and then Kevin Nash makes his big return. He was out for a few weeks with an injury, I believe. And then he was calling out the Giant because, World War III's, they're basically their way of Royal Rumble. 3 rings, 60 guys. Winner gets a title shot, the world champion. So, Nash and Giant, pretty much been jaw-jacking promos about who's the bigger man going to be. And the Giant won the year before, so see what happens there. And then they butchered out Canada because they're pretty much trying to convince WCW that they have acquired Bret Hart to join the NWO. And Bret Hart has not made an appearance yet in WCW, so it'll be interesting to see when he makes his appearance, which would probably be in a couple of weeks, I believe. There's a lot of matches in WCW Monday Nitro. The first one was Steven Regal and Dave Taylor, and they actually pulled the upset win over Harlem Heat, Booker T, and Stevie Ray, which I'm a little surprised that Regal and Taylor were tag team because I thought those two had a falling out, but whatever. And then they had a match with Chris Jericho and Disco Inferno. And what really bothers me about some of the stuff on Nitros is Chris Jericho has his Break the Walls Down theme. It sounds so weird in WCW because some of the WCW wrestlers used slight variations of popular 90s songs. Let's see here. Like DDP had Smells Like Teen Spirit. Like a little riff variation there. And I know Raven had like a Come As You Are by Nirvana, I think. But I can't really remember them all. But needless to say, a lot of the themes, and especially ECW, which they use a lot of like real life rock songs. So they are all dubbed with like generic, songs. But anyways, Jericho beats the Disco Inferno. He was on quite a losing streak. The week before, he lost the television title to Saturn, who made his WCW debut. And then right after the match, Raven's Flock sitting at ringside kind of beat up Disco, and then Skyler Riggs comes down and kind of hesitates because recently he got the patch on the eye because Raven tripped him and Riggs busted his face on the chair. So eventually Riggs joins the Flock, but that didn't happen quite yet. But then Barbarian wrestles Glacier. Now, if you remember Glacier, he was the guy that looked like Sub-Zero, and that whole gimmick was, I don't know, I look back at it and it's just cheesy because the guy had vignettes for months hyping him up, and the guy was nothing. I don't even think Glacier won a title in WCW. I honestly don't remember him doing anything. I remember he had this huge feud of Mortis and Raph that lasted forever, it felt like. And then he brought Ernest the Cat Miller in, and that whole thing was just stupid. But, Glacier beats, Barbarian, and then Ming shows up and then attacks him afterwards. So I'm sure there's a nice mid-card feud going there. But then Raven then cuts a promo, and then that's when Van Hammer makes his reappearance in WCW, I guess, as a Flock member. And the Flock, I think, is sitting with Saturn, then Kidman's with him now. Sick Boy, and then Stevie Richards has been there some weeks and not there some weeks, and I think eventually he fades out and goes back to ECW, if I remember right, because I know he doesn't stay long. And then Raven will pick up some few more people for his flock, if I remember right. Then Yuji Nagata beat Alex Wright, whoopee. Then NWO, Hogan and Bischoff come to the ring, cutting promos on Sting. And then Chris Benoit took on Saturn, and then the flock attacked. And then Fit Finlay had a little beef with Benoit, so they got a little feud going on. And no, Fit Finlay does not join the flock, if you're thinking that. And then we also had a match between Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio, and Rey has had Eddie's number, 3 straight wins. The most recent one, Rey beat him at Halloween Havoc 1997. Classic match between these two. I definitely recommend checking that match out on the WWE Network. Halloween Havoc 97, Rey Mysterio versus Eddie Guerrero Cruiserweight Championship match. Phenomenal match. And this Nitro match wasn't bad either. I mean, these two are great competitors, but the title changed hands this night, believe it or not. Eddie beat Rey finally. And right afterwards, Dean Malenko confronts Eddie, so it looks like we're going to have some beef of those guys. And I can watch Dean Malenko and Eddie throw down anytime, so I'm all pumped for that one. And then the Rey trailer, the Macho Man got into a match. And, of course, NWO shenanigans, Macho won. But, of course, they reversed the decision because of the after attack. And Rey Trailer's WCW run was nothing great. Big Bubba Rogers, whatever you want to call the guy, just... Well, let's just be honest. The Big Boss Man, when he was in WWE or F, was more special. And then we had a match between Diamond Dallas Page and Kurt Hennig, and that match ended with DQ because Hennig used the United States Championship as a weapon. And then, of course, the show closed out with the NWO beating up Sting. So it wasn't really a great Nitro. They really don't have much build for World War III. So, I mean, other than the 60-man match, I mean, there's no really matches built. I mean, it's like WCW is really just focused on Hogan Sting right now for the most part. And this Nitro really didn't do any justice. Moving on to ECW, then Hardcore TV for this week. ECW is only an hour, maybe a little less than that, But they had a few quick, matches right off the bat. They kind of cut. They usually ECW they'll usually show like the finish of some matches, so they don't show you a whole match. Just Incredible recently debuted in ECW, and that's pretty much where he has most of his success. He was kind of floating around in WWF as Aldo Montoya, Portuguese Man of War, and that gimmick was a complete flop. But Just Incredible, though, looked solid in some of his matches. This one was quick, though. He just kind of took care of Chris Chetty real quick. And the manager of Just Incredible is Jason, the sexiest man ever, or whatever he calls himself. Jason was more relevant in earlier ECW. He kind of disappears, comes back. But took on the Blue Meanie, and the Blue Meanie beat him. And I can't remember the Blue Meanie winning a match in ECW, so that was kind of funny to see, at least in the early days. Mostly he was kind of a BWO lackey of Richards and the Flock before that, or Raven's Nest, I guess they called it in ECW. But the big match of the night, well, actually, first there was Rick Rude and Bam Bam Bigelow. Yeah, here's a funny thing for you. I never knew Bam Bam Bigelow was a world heavyweight champion in ECW, so I started watching it, so that was kind of cool to see. He beat Shane Douglas not too long ago where I'm at. And they got the rematch at November to November 97, which is a couple of weeks away from where I'm watching. So ECW pay-per-views are pretty solid, though. I'm looking forward to watching that event. And, of course, Bam Bam used to be in the triple threat with Shane Douglas and Chris Candido. And basically, the triple threat's still going because Lance Storm has taken the spot of Bam Bam after Bam Bam kind of just left him and took the world title from Shane Douglas. So Bam Bam got attacked for his troubles. Main event, though, was Bill Alfonso's little team of Sabu and Rob Van Dam taking on Taz and Tommy Dreamer. And Tommy Dreamer won the Sandman for his partner, but the Sandman's nowhere to be found. And Taz obviously is very on my own. I don't want nobody. I don't trust anybody. Kind of like a Stone Cold agenda, basically. And the match was, your typical ECW match. Tables getting broken, people getting beat up. It was, kind of chaotic. Yeah, but I've seen these guys tangle so many times, But I tell you what, though, Taz delivers some mean suplexes. If you haven't watched any Taz matches, definitely check him out. That guy can throw some people. He's phenomenal. And this is some great Rob Van Dam stuff here as well. He's in the beginning stages of, cutting some promos. And him and Alfonso and Sabu kind of just does his thing in the ring. But they got that whole promoting WWF thing going on. And they would sometimes bury opponents in a WWF flag. And Alfonso will be wearing like a Monday Night Raw hat. So it's kind of funny actually looking back at all. But, as the show comes to a close, though, the Sandman is back. Lights go out, and then there's the Sandman on the ladder busting open a beer. So, obviously, some Sandman and Sabu's got some unfinished business, I'm thinking. And Rob Van Dam's got unfinished business of probably Taz and Tommy Dreamer. So, those guys are all just intertwined for how many weeks now. So, anyways, that takes care of November 10th, 97 for your big three wrestling shows. And that is going to do it for me here on the first episode of the Chairman's Wrestling Podcast. I'm going to be watching, obviously, the current product tomorrow night, Monday Night Raw, July 4th. And I'm going to do some live tweeting, so check me out at Twitter, at Chairman Podcast. I'm going to live tweet some Raw, what I'm thinking is going on, so that could be entertaining. And then I probably might do another video here regarding current WWE product here later this week. Hoping to get one about the draft. And as soon as I can watch also the archive footage of the following week of, the stuff in the past, I can let you guys know what's going on there. So, thanks for listening to the first episode of the Chairman's Wrestling Podcast. Like, subscribe, leave comments, ask questions, all that good stuff. And I will catch you guys next time.